Okay, good morning. We're up to Siman Reish Nun Dalet Sif Hey. Says the Mechaber, Ein Neisnin Somach Lechashecha Pas L'Tanur. You can't put bread into an oven very close to Shabbos, Ele Kadeshe Yikrumu, until it crusts. Pirush, he says in the bracket, Sheyala Pnei Alechem Krum V'Klippe Machmas Oish, until the challah, the bread, has crusted up. Poneha Medubokim B'Tanur, the part of the bread which is attached to the tanur. If you picture, you can picture the oven in Tabun, the oven of old, that you have an oven with a source of heat, and then you take the dough and you slap it onto the inside of the oven. So he says, Kadesha Yikrimu Poneo Hamudubokim Betanur, the side of the bread which is attached to the oven. V'lo charora al gabi gecholim, nor should you put a bread on top of coals, unless the part of the dough which is against the fire has crusted over. Any time where you take the dough and you pull it, and the chutin are not nimshach, kor krimas ponim. In other words, it's baked a level that is no longer doughy, and if you pull a little bit of it, it's no longer going to sort of become sort of stretchy. So that's considered krimas ponim, or pastida, or paladin, some sort of pastry which has got a filling, of meat or a fruit or a fish or something. You've got to make sure before you put it into in the oven Erev Shabbos that it's got to be by Shabbos. It's got to be crusted over on both sides. Plus the content, the filling has got to be cooked to the level of Michael ben Drusai. Okay, let's just do the Mishnah Berurah till that point. So again, what have we said? That you can't when you put a challah in an oven on Erev Shabbos, it's got to have reached the point of yikrumu poneho, that it's crusted over, the side of the dough which is attached to the oven has crusted over. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sifkot and Chof Hei, Kadesh yikrumu poneho, that from before Shabbos the side has crusted up, because once the side of the dough, one side of the dough has crusted over, we're no longer concerned that you're yechatze b'gecholim. And the Rambam, the Orach Shulchan says, the Rambam says in footnote 17, shechitu gecholim lacha shekom rapas nifs mafsedes hapas. Because if you're going to stoke the coals, once you're at the stage where the loaf has been baked and the side is crusted over, you're actually going to burn it. It's going to do damage to it. Okay, Chof Vav, says the Mishnah Berurah, hamedubokim betanur v'achronim iskimu. It doesn't have to actually be only that side, like I described before. When in the good old days, you would take the dough and you would slap it into the side of the oven. But lav dafka that side, even the other side, if the other side facing the fire has crusted over, that is sufficient. Even the Mechaber holds like this. He says in the Mechaber that we're talking about the side attached to the oven has crusted over. That's easier to crust up. It doesn't make a difference if it's on the bottom of the oven or any form of oven. He's got a different. He says in the footnote 4 is a becken is some sort of a different type of oven. The dafke ima pastak. We're dafke talking about a situation where the loaf is fairly thin. If it's a very thick loaf, and it won't bake or cook quickly. If you've got a thick dough, then it needs to be both the top side and the underside has got to have crusted over from when Shabbos comes in. That's the sort of the equivalent of Michael ben Drusai, as it were, on baking a loaf of bread. Okay, furthermore, then the Mechaber says. The Ramah says another litmus test is that you pull some of the dough and it doesn't become stretchy. That's a sign that it's baked sufficiently. It's nikras ponov. Says the Mishnah Berurah of Zayin, even if the bread is very thick, nami sagi bezer hashir lekula alma, that if it doesn't stretch, the dough doesn't sort of stretch, then that's everyone agrees to that share. To kiven the enachutin imshachen, since the threads of the dough don't stretch, b'vada nikrum poneh hatev. Obviously, the crust is crusted sufficiently. Bein mamala, bein mamata. Okay. Karu krimas ponim v'chol zeh b'she'ein gara for cotton. This is only if the oven is not gara for cotton. That means that the coals have not been removed, or you haven't put ash over the coals. The equivalent today is whatever the blech, etc. Aval bekira betanur shelanu k'sheu gar for cotton, but our tanur or kira is considered gar for cotton. Oy k'shesoysim piatanur batit, or if you seal the oven, mutar litena pas betanur samach l'shkia b'chol gavni. So if the oven happens to be gar for cotton, or you seal it up, then there's no concern of shem yechata, and then that would be okay, even if you put it in samach l'shkia. Okay. Then the Ramah spoke about the pastida. The pastida is like a pastry with filling. There, in order to put that in before Shabbos, you've got to make sure that it's crusted bein milmalo and milmato, both the top and the bottom side. Says the Mishnah Berurah Chavtes, lemala hainu letzad chalal hatanur. That means facing the opening of the oven. The lemata means the side against the pots which you're baking in, the baking tray. According to the Mechaber above, it actually only needs to be one side. Since it's thick, you've got a pastry with a filling, it's thick and it doesn't cook as quickly as a loaf of bread. He disagrees, and the Gra says no, it needs to be hardened or crusted on both the top and the bottom. They will both agree, but and that's for a different reason. Since the pastry with the filling, it's the top and the bottom are not really connected, as it were, as two separate entities, because the filling separates the top and the bottom. It's like two different loaves of bread. And each one needs the crusting over. Okay. And not only that, whatever is the filling has to be cooked. Whatever you fill the pastida with, whether it's meat or fish or fruit, whatever it is, because if the filling is not going to be cooked, the concern is still there that you might come to stoke to accelerate the cooking process. Okay, now back to the Mechaber. We're now the top line of the Mechaber. So you're a naughty boy, you went ahead and did it, and you put it in very close to Shabbos, and you hadn't crusted over sufficiently. If you did this on purpose, also ad motzei Shabbos b'chdesh yasu, then you can't partake of this food until motzei Shabbos b'chdesh yasu. Say it takes 45 minutes to cook, then you have to wait 45 minutes after motzei Shabbos. That's the knas. V'im b'shoigeg, and if you did it b'shoigeg, by mistake, if you haven't got what to eat on Shabbos, Chazal did not make the knas, you did it b'shoigeg, and therefore we allow you, if you haven't got what to eat, we allow you to do it. And what should you do? You tell other people who also haven't got what to eat, to come and have something to eat, and let's eat the bread that is put in the oven. So they'll allow you in that situation. Let's just do the Mishnah Berurah till that point. B'chdei yasu lamed beis hainu ha'achila. The time it takes ha'achila avul haradim and atana pasha demuta tekev motzei Shabbos. You can peel it. In other words, you got to wait to eat it. You can pull it off the wall of the oven straight away, but you can't benefit from it until however that long that is. B'shoigeg. Now, the Mishnah asked the question. This is Lamed Gimel. You see, late the trouble is in Sif Ches, which hopefully we'll do tomorrow. We make a knas when it comes to shogeg. So how come over here we're not making? We say mezid. You got to wait b'chtesh yasa, but shogeg we don't make a knas. So how come there in Sif Ches we don't make a chilek shogeg mezid? We make a knas in both. The reason is because here we're talking about a guy who hasn't got what else to eat. You can't have your sudas without lechem mishnah. Therefore, shari, if it was b'sheigeg, we allow it. Avol b'tavshil, which is the context of sifches, ein chiyav kol kach le'echol b'Shabbos. You don't have to eat it. Ve'ein hachanami, di'emein ledova achel le'echol klal ki yemesa tavshil. And if taka, that's all you've got to eat, then bilvad shehesha b'sheigeg, mutzalei l'achol. In hachanami, if that's all you've got to eat, we'd allow you to do it if you did it b'sheigeg. She also lists anas b'Shabbos because you can't fast on Shabbos. Commission cost of simin reish peiches. Ulefizeh the chol hahetu mipnei she'ein lepasach lechol. Since the whole heta to allow the fellow who did it b'shegeg to eat this, afilu b'tanurim shalonu shemavur lekama b'siv zayin she'ein bo mishum redia. Even with our ovens where we don't really do redias hapas anymore, just only if you go to Taboon, that's where you see redias hapas in the good old ovens of old. But nowadays we don't bake like that. We don't slap the dough against the wall. Gamkein also listapik minapas yosim misholosh sudas. Still, even there's no difference in with our ovens, even though the baking process is slightly different, we don't allow you to eat more than sholosh sudas worth of bread. It says the Lamadalad, more than sholosh sudas. Ve'im bepas echod shehoisi yesh b'kadei sholosh sudas. If it's a very large loaf of bread and that will suffice for 3 meals, shuv osel lirdos, you can't take any more. You can't peel any more off the oven walls. Afal gav the ein lekol suda kikar sholim v'lechem mishnah. Even though you'd have thought maybe there's a svara to say that I haven't got lechem mishnah. Once on Friday night I break off the bread, it's not sholim anymore. But since lemaisa I can eat, I'll have what to eat on Shabbos lunch and Shabbos shudas, then they don't allow you to do any more than that. Okay, let's continue the machaba. I'm 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down. Uchshehu roida. And when you peel the loaf of bread off the wall of the oven, lo yirde b'marde. You shouldn't use a marde. What is that? Pirush, barachas, or b'mizra, targum mirda palabelaz. I looked it up. Apparently the correct English term for this is a baker's peel. Never heard that before. But it's like a spatula. It's like a special instrument that you use to sort of to scoop off the loaf from the oven wall, some sort of spatula or something. So you shouldn't use a marde. Why? Ela besakin, just use a knife because it's considered uvda dechol, and therefore use just a knife rather than a dedicated instrument. And if you can't, then yirde b'marde. If you can't do it, then use the spatula. If you put it in the oven before Shabbos with sufficient time that the loaf would crust over, since you didn't do an issa because you put it in thinking that there would be enough time for it to crust over, and tzorech Shabbos, then roide kadarka, you can be roide, you can peel off the loaf in the normal fashion. But if there's no need for it, for over Shabbos, then it's also even if you do it with a shinu, with a knife or something like that. That's only talking about an oven which is not sealed with cement or something like that. Aval imhu tuach batit aisheinu eifel etzorech Shabbos rak lemotze Shabbos. But if it's not tuach batit, or if it's baked for non-Shabbos purposes, the yeshlo zman le'afosei mutter, because you put it in before Shabbos, you're allowed to bake before Shabbos, and then you just leave it, and you're not planning to have it anyway on Shabbos. Then it's actually mutter. Because you weren't planning on eating on Shabbos, so therefore there's no gezeira of shemi yechatze. Okay, good. Says the Mishnah Berurah Lamed Yirde b'marde. You should peel it off. You shouldn't peel it off with a marde, with this special baker's peel, this spatula. To redias hapas le'avish shvus gomor. It's not a proper drabanon. The Gemara says it's a choch, not a malach, I think. Ella mishum uvda d'chalos. It's only also because of uvda d'chal. And therefore, the tzorech Shabbos they were matir. Very interestingly, if you look at 25, he says an interesting footnote. In other words, you find other instances where something which is also mishum uvda d'chal, it's like a weekday activity, actually Chazal will matter it. Not every shvus was allowed l'tzorech mitzvah. Rak shvus shel uvda d'chol. V'chein kosav lekamon l'inyan medida. For example, in Shin Vov, about measuring on Shabbos. Well, that's also sha'afal pisha asurim mishum uvda d'chol. Even though the issa to measure on Shabbos is a problem of uvda d'chol, mikol makom yesh b'tzorech mitzvah. If there's a mitzvah need for it, hari muteres, for example, to measure a mikveh or something like that, that would be allowed. Okay, let's just finish off. Lamed Vov, Roida Kadarka. If you can't peel it off in any other way, Roida Kadarka Lamed Vov, V'Sefer Eli Rabba Kosov D'Yesh Lahachmir Ka'Poiskim D'Sfir Lahu Ta'afil L'Nosla Behet Tzorech Lios Hardia Dafka B'Shinoi. They say actually you've always got to be Roida, you've always got to peel off the bread with a Shinoi. Avlimu Tuach, if the oven is sealed, Atchilas HaSivka is going back on the beginning of the sieve, to Muta Litain, to Lo Gazrin Hashem Yistar Atit V'Yichat. We're not Chayshesh that you're going to peel away the cement and then be Mechata. You won't go to that trouble, you just won't do it. V'ayim B'Siv Zayin Hechi Snaik Bin Hardia. Good. Lamed Ches La'Faisoi, Ta'afilu B'Le Chitu Yeh Nefe Heter. Even without the Chitu, if you leave it there, it's you're planning to eat this not for Shabbos, then, then even without the Chitu, it's going to be baked well. V'ayin b'magen avrom shekosov de batanum shelonu kim de Chaim lan lekam b'siv zayin de muta lirdos mehem b'Shabbos v'lechol afilu yesh le hagimel sidish Shabbos, that since we allow him to peel off, even if he has what else to eat, chashin shem yimolech lechol me'apas shebetanu b'Shabbos v'yichat b'cholim k'tei she'yispashal meira, then we're going to actually, it's going to be the opposite. Therefore, you're going to be taka b'cheshesh that you might come to do chitui and cook on Shabbos. So just to summarize, that just like in Shehir that we learned in Reish and Gimel, that you shouldn't put something in unless it's either Mufashul Kol Tzorach or Macham Ben Drusai before Shabbos, so too with bread, that you should only put it in if there's going to be sufficient time that the bread is going to crust over. And if you did it b'mezid, then you can't eat that bread until Motzei Shabbos b'chdei sheyasi. If you did it b'sheigeg and you've got nothing else to eat, then you would be allowed to peel it off. So,